everyone. What a privilege to be here, and to start with someone like Sam. What an example to everyone. Thank you very much, Sam. So, the one thing I wish everyone knew about culture. When we use the word culture, we immediately go to the collective, the shared beliefs, the organisation, the system. Yes, that is true, but ultimately what comprises all of that is the individuals. So from that perspective, I want to talk a little bit about why I think culture is actually a lot more personal than we actually believe. The beauty of that is you actually have a lot more influence on culture than you might perceive, because if we all do our bit, we can absolutely move the culture. So it is personal. RBL are leading researchers in HR globally. They do a great HR competency model. What does great HR look like? They've been doing this study now, it's in its 7th year, and they do it every 5 years. In late 2016, they launched the newest version of their model, which you can see up on screen. And they actually added something to the model this year, which I thought was a really great add. And it's the element of being a paradox navigator. Paradox navigation is not the sole domain of HR practitioners. Talk to anyone you work with, leadership teams, regional teams, individual contributors, and we're all faced with balancing short-term with long-term, global for local, top line for bottom line. But if you do work in the world of HR, you'll realise that our world has become increasingly about navigating these paradoxes and tensions. I am a working child of the mid-90s. I started in the era of Jim Collins. It was all about built to last and then good to great. And one of the phrases that really sticks with me is how we need to embrace the genius of the and get away from the tyranny of the or. Just a different way of saying paradox navigator. So what does that look like in practice? In my line of work, it is about the and not the or. For all of us it is. Specifically in my line of work, yes, we have to reduce costs to contribute to bottom line efforts and maintain a great culture and engagement and retain great talent. It's not good enough to do one or two. You have to do all three. And I think the sooner we can all get our heads around that as HR practitioners, if you happen to work in that field or if you're a leader, the sooner we will be more effective in contributing both to individual satisfaction and to our organisation's success. I was really privileged a couple of weeks ago with my team. It was the first time Campbell Arnott has been nominated as one of Australia's best places to work. So that was really exciting for us. Thank you. Thank you to the team. There's a few of them in here today. But what was most exciting, and what some of you may not know, is that the submission process is quite extensive, but 2/3 of the score is actually based on an employee survey. You can't pick who you send it to. We have over 2,200 employees in Australia, and we got about 650 responses. And in order to even make the cut, you have to get a minimum score of 70% as an aggregate score. So 650 people who took the time to tell us that they think it's a pretty great place to work. You can't tell me then that it's not personal. It has to be personal, otherwise we wouldn't be getting that sort of feedback. Continuing the and theme, and this is the great thing about doing Melbourne before Sydney, because you get to sort of tweak something. So I said to Sean, I've added in a slide. He goes, listen, don't go too long, because people get really excited because they've done Melbourne and then they go too long in Sydney. So Sean, I promise wherever you are, I won't go too long. But the and theme, I think, is perfectly illustrated in LSI. You can't be great at task and not be great at people. It cuts right through the middle of the constructive styles. You have to do both. So yes, we know that culture is about the collective. We know it's about the system, but it is absolutely about you and it's absolutely about me. This is Campbell's sort of tapestry on a page. This is our Campbell purpose, real food that matters for life's moments. You can see our real food philosophy and also our values, which we recently refreshed across the business. Do right and be real. Seek the power of different. Dare to disrupt and own it like a founder. Fantastic, motivating words. But ultimately, if we don't create the connections for each and every individual back to these values, back to the purpose, it will be the proverbial poster on the wall. This is Tom Vickers. Tom Vickers is our customer director for Woolworths and has been with the business for over 20 years. This is actually a LinkedIn post we shared about Tom's view on why he thinks it's personal. And I know it's a bit of a pithy line that he worked at Huntingwood and there's a machine called the Vickers at Huntingwood. It's not why he thinks owning it like a founder is important. But it does illustrate the point around making sure that people can find a connection, an individual, personal connection, back to your values, back to your purpose, because that's when the magic really happens. We are more similar than we are different. It's been an interesting process for me. I've had the privilege of working in with a number of different cultures and living in a few different places around the world. As I was prepping for this part of my presentation, I did a bit more research, and Dr. Janet Zamal, who's actually here, over there, did some great research on what is the ideal leadership impact LSI across and within different countries. No surprises that whether it's Australia, New Zealand, USA, I can't remember, I think that's Belgium, yes, and Germany, you can see that they pretty much look the same. Irrespective of where you are in the world, constructive styles are seen as being more effective and more optimal. But here's where the and comes in again, and a bit of a but. You've got to remember the volume dial. People are different. We are more similar than different, but we have to remember the differences. I work very closely with our Indonesian team. Indonesia has the happiest culture in the world. It is researched. That doesn't mean that I don't have leadership team members who would be more interested in solitary pursuits than pursuing affiliation. In China, I've worked with some amazing leaders, and yes, face is important, but I can tell you now, some of the most vulnerable, impactful sharing of self leaders I've seen have been in that market. And in Russia, a country that's very well known for its achievement orientation, particularly in the workplace, that doesn't mean it's at the detriment of wonderful coaches. So be mindful of the volume dial as you're dealing with people, and it doesn't have to be country cultural. It can be any culture, but be mindful of that and do make it personal. The next thing I wanted to talk about was knowing what floats people's boats. And I've been really privileged to work for some great leaders over the years, Lorraine Murphy, who's now at NAB, and Bob Barber, who I believe is in the audience somewhere. And Bob, please don't be embarrassed, but I'm about to share an example of when this insight came to life for me. So picture this. It's 1999. I've been working for about 4.5 years with Line. I came straight out of uni, straight into a job, and I hadn't taken a break. I'd seen all my friends do their gap years, sabbaticals, and I thought, you know what, I really just want to take some time off. So I spoke to Bob and I said, look, I'd really like to take some time off, Bob, what do you reckon? He goes, sure, we'll give you 3 months, you can travel, then you come back. I said, fantastic. A month later, the phone rings, he said, Mary, it's Bob. I said, yep. He goes, have you booked your trip yet? And I said, no, I haven't. He said, I've got a proposition for you. We'd like you to go to China for a year. Can you defer your trip and go to China for a year? I'm like, okay, that's a bit out of the blue, okay. But what we want to do is instead of giving you your expat bonus, which at the time you used to get expat bonuses, no one does that anymore, but anyway, back in the day, we actually want to give you 6 months paid leave. So you can take your trip after you do your stint in China. Now here's the interesting thing. Which one was worth more from a monetary value point of view? The expat bonus or the 6 months paid leave? Any guesses? Anyone? No. The expat bonus was worth a couple of grand more at the time. But I didn't care because my boss had seen me. My boss knew exactly what mattered to me and positioned an opportunity and value to me and the organisation in a way that told me that I had been seen. It was a really powerful lesson in understanding what's important. Do you know what's important to the people that work for you? Do you know what's important to the people that work with you? If you don't, I suggest you take some time to have some conversations because it can really unlock a lot of value for the organisation. We talk about motivation, and this is a slide that I stole from David. Thank you, David. But you know, there's a lot of research out there, McClelland, Latham, Dr. Cook, who's in the audience. We know all about what motivates people. My effort can make a difference. I do something meaningful. I'm learning something new. I'm supported by those around me. I enjoy what I do. The essence of the constructive styles. Knowing that we know that we're more similar than different and we pretty much share similar motivators, what can we do to unlock the conversations in our businesses to really connect it back to a personal driver for people? At Campbell Arnott, it's been a great ride for the last few years. We've been growing top and bottom line. This year was, you know, I'm looking at one of our sales guys in the audience. ANZ grew, Mike, just by a little bit. But it's been a good ride for the last 3 years, but it wasn't always the way. And about 5 years ago, we were faced with some significant business challenges, had to make some really tough calls, had to cut spend, had to restructure. And we sort of looked at ourselves and said, what are we going to do here? Because we don't have a lot of the investment levers that we could normally pull. So we actually looked at everything that we had and we said, you know what, we're not really doing a good job about talking to the organisation about the menu of things we actually do have. So we did something simple. We created what we called our total rewards tree. And you can see the words here and hopefully they resonate with the previous slide. We talked about things that we do that reward people, that drive achievement, that drive growth, that drive balance and that drive belonging. You heard Sam talk earlier about community engagement. Our Arnott's Foundation raised last year over $1 million in gross funds. I cannot tell you how personally motivating participation in that foundation is for a number of our employees. So we basically created a tree and then we gave managers a checklist. And we said, look, do you know how to have a conversation about drivers of importance here? If you don't, here's a 2-page thought starter question, Q&A. And it was really powerful at the time when we were going through these difficult challenges as a business. We'd identified about, over 70 people that we really needed to retain in the business, key talent that we couldn't afford to lose. And I'm pleased to say that 97% retention rate you saw on the previous slide was those individuals. And this was a direct result of some of this work. The reason I share it is we can all fall into the classic mistake of thinking everyone is motivated by what we are motivated by. But do you really know what floats other people's boats? And not just your direct reports, but your peers, your bosses. It can be a real unlock. Vulnerability. Okay, let's talk a little bit about vulnerability and why it's so important that it's a two-way street. Back in the early 2000s, it was all about Bill George and authentic leadership. And a lot of you know what the traits are there: self-awareness, genuine, mission-driven, leading with heart, etc. Then in the sort of, I don't know what to call it, like 2010 timeframe, I'm sure there's a term for it, but so this was like early 2000, 2001 too. This is now 2010. There started to be a bit of a dialogue around vulnerability. And as I was doing more coaching work with people, and this is a really basic model that I'm sure I've ripped off from Jim Collins, but everyone else has ripped it off. But this is really a model of helping people think through what motivates them from a career point of view. What are you best at? What do you love? And what's going to allow you to lead the life you want to live? As I was having a lot of these coaching conversations, which I tend to do in my line of work, I realised that we were seeing immense outcomes with certain individuals versus others as we were going through this process. And the ones for whom we really saw the benefits come through loud and clear were the individuals that were prepared to be vulnerable. The individuals who were really prepared to demonstrate the characteristics of vulnerability. And it wasn't just great for the organisation, because it was great for them. We all say it, we've all heard it. We spend more time at work. If you took sleep out of the equation, we spend more time at work than we do with our loved ones, the people we choose to spend our lives with. So if you cannot optimise and maximise the time at work, why are we doing it? So vulnerability. No wonder we're scared of the word. The dictionary definition talks about being in a place of harm or needing special care. And of course it conjures up images of us sitting on Chesterfield lounges, having psychoanalysis and psychotherapy with our teams. This is not what we're talking about in the vulnerability context. So what do we mean by vulnerability and leadership? Firstly, it's about being courageous. You heard from Sam. He stuck up his LSI, the first one. Not just the good one, the first one. Who was here last year when Jen White spoke? Yeah, and I think Jen is in the audience. I actually met her in the loo, so I was very excited to meet Jen. What an awesome example of vulnerability and courage. It's not weakness, it's courage to be able to share the truth. So courage is the first thing, to be seen, to share your perspectives, and to be seen for all of who you are. Truth. One thing that's interesting, and I've been working now for over 22 years, the more senior you get, the less truth you get. It is a fact. Talk to any CEO and they will tell you it is one of the loneliest places to be. Why can't we change that conversation? Why can't we encourage people to speak truth? And by doing so, by speaking truth to power, by speaking truth to each other, yes, it means you have to get a bit uncomfortable, but ultimately you will be, generating so much more worth. In the great words of Justin Bieber, is it too late now to say sorry? It is incredible to me how few leaders, I think leaders, somehow there's this manual that people think, oh shit, the more senior I get, the less I can admit my mistakes. That's baloney. And for those that know me, I could have used a different word then. We absolutely must take accountability. We absolutely must stand up and say, I stuffed that up. I had a bad day. I'm sorry, I wasn't in a good mood. It just makes us human and it makes us more connected. And guess what? It builds trust. And as we know, trust is the key to a lot of things. Lorraine McCarthy, who actually works for Human Synergistics, has this great quote, and it's interesting for me about vulnerability and where I see the roots for vulnerability. And sorry, I should source that a lot of this is Dr. Brené Brown's research. If you haven't looked at her TED Talk on vulnerability, suggest you look at it. It's a great 20 minutes spent. But for me, this is the essence of self-actualizing. There's a quote that she uses, which is online on the website in one of her summaries on LSI1 and self-actualizing. If our self-talk is always understanding, compassionate, and supportive, we are free to be the innately magnificent person we were born to be, to fly, to experience peace and joy. And sorry, these are really lovely words. And this isn't a put-on. Anyone that works with me knows I get a bit emotional. So, what does this mean for all of us? It's a journey. So in the spirit of practicing what I preach, I will share my LSIs with you. My first one was when I was 21 in 1997, and I can't find it. It was shit. And apparently, Human Synergistics reckon they can get it for me. So when I do find it, I'll add it to the list. But it is a journey. This is the first hand-drawn one. Clearly perfectionistic, as you can see, with the way it's actually hand-drawn. And look, it's been a journey, right? It took me 10 years to get below the upper quartile and perfectionistic. Of course, I'm proud of the blue. It ebbs and flows, but I need to watch that things can spike under pressure. Moving countries is always interesting, or changing jobs. Approval seems to rear its ugly head. It is a journey. My coach and one of my most amazing friends, we were having this session one day and I said to her, when does it ever end, this self-development journey? I'm so sick of it. You know, like, shit. And she swiftly said to me, when you die. So, you know, I hope to live for a long time, so I might as well just accept the fact that it's a journey. So the bottom line is, culture is personal. You need to get great at being a paradox navigator. You need to remember that we are more similar than we are different, but remember the volume dial. Take the time and the care, be humanistic, encouraging, and find out what floats people's boats. And never forget that vulnerability is a two-way street. It's about you and it's about me. Thank you so much.